had always been drawn to the eerie tales of our small town, the whispered legends of restless spirits lurking in the shadows, waiting for a chance to seek revenge. But I never truly believed in such tales until that fateful night when I, a taxi driver, encountered the malevolent ghost. It was a gloomy evening, rain splattering against my windshield as I drove down the desolate, winding roads that led to the outskirts of town. I had just picked up my last fare for the night, a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was shaky, and the directions were vague. They simply told me to go to the old, abandoned farmhouse at the edge of town. As I approached the decrepit building, a shiver ran down my spine. It was said to be haunted, a place where no one dared to venture after dark. The windows were shattered, and the wood cracked as if the very structure itself was in pain. But I was a skeptic, confident that the stories were nothing but folklore. I pulled up to the farmhouse, the headlights cutting through the darkness, revealing a solitary figure standing by the side of the road. It was a woman, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of a nearby street lamp. She was drenched, her clothes clinging to her as if she had been caught in the downpour. Reluctantly, I unlocked the doors, and she climbed into the back seat. Her face was obscured by a hood, but her presence sent a chill through the air. Her voice was barely more than a whisper as she gave me an address, a secluded cemetery on the outskirts of town. Without a word, I started the engine and headed in the direction she indicated. The night seemed to grow darker with every passing mile, the rain drumming a haunting rhythm on the roof of the car. My unease grew as I stole glances at the woman through the rear-view mirror. Her eyes, when I caught a glimpse, were empty, devoid of any emotion. As we approached the cemetery, the atmosphere became even more oppressive. The gravestones loomed like silent sentinels, guarding the secrets of the dead. I parked the car and turned to the woman. "We're here," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound composed. Without a word, she opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I watched as she walked towards a particular grave, her form illuminated by the faint moonlight. She knelt before it, her movements slow and deliberate, as if in a trance. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the eerie scene unfolding before me. The air grew thick with tension, and a sense of dread settled in my chest. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared in my taxi, she vanished. I stumbled out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. I approached the grave she had visited, my footsteps echoing through the graveyard. The headstone read, Eleanor Hartman, 1897-1923. My blood ran cold as I realized the significance of the name and date. Eleanor Hartman was the daughter of the town's mayor, a young woman who had died under mysterious circumstances. As I stood there, a bone-chilling wind swept through the cemetery, extinguishing the nearby lanterns. Panic set in as I fumbled for my keys, desperate to escape this nightmarish place. But before I could reach the safety of my car, a presence materialized before me. It was the woman, but now her form was translucent, her eyes glowing with malevolence. She reached out her ethereal hand, and I could feel an icy grip on my throat, squeezing the very life out of me. Her lips moved, whispering a name, the name of the man responsible for her death. In that horrifying moment, I understood her purpose. She sought revenge, not just on her murderer, but on anyone who had played a part in concealing the truth. I was an unwitting pawn in her vengeful game, a mere instrument to carry out her will. With a final, agonizing gasp, I succumbed to her supernatural wrath, collapsing to the ground as the world around me faded into darkness. The last thing I heard was her chilling laughter, echoing through the graveyard as she continued her quest for retribution. And so, on that night ride to the gloomy cemetery, I became just another victim of the evil ghost's insatiable thirst for revenge, forever bound to the chilling legends of our town, a cautionary tale for those who dared to doubt the existence of the supernatural. The town of Willowbrook was known for its picturesque landscapes by day, but by night it became a haunting abyss of secrets and sorrow. I, a cab driver, unwittingly became entangled in one such tale, a story of love, betrayal, and an unending quest for closure. It was a stormy evening when I received the mysterious call. The voice on the other end was faint, almost ethereal, instructing me to pick up a passenger at the old, decrepit bridge that spanned the murky river. The bridge was infamous in Willowbrook, known as the Bridge of Lost Souls, due to the numerous tragedies that had occurred there. As I approached the bridge, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The rain lashed against the windshield, and the wind howled like a mournful dirge. Standing at the edge of the bridge was a woman, her soaked clothes clinging to her frail form. She looked lost and vulnerable, like a wraith from another world. I pulled over, unlocking the doors, and she entered the cab without a word. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying, and her trembling hands clutched a crumpled photograph. It was a picture of a dashing young man with a warm smile. "Where to?" I asked gently, noticing the pain etched into every line of her face. She hesitated, her voice quivering. "The cemetery," she finally whispered. I navigated the winding roads towards the cemetery, the atmosphere growing heavier with each passing mile. She remained silent, lost in her thoughts, the photograph still clasped tightly in her hand. We arrived at the cemetery, the rain showing no sign of relenting. I watched as she stepped out of the cab and made her way to a weathered tombstone, her steps heavy with grief. I couldn't help but follow her, compelled by an invisible force. She knelt before the grave, her tears mingling with the rain as she whispered words of longing and regret. The name on the tombstone read, "Ethan Reynolds, beloved son and brother," the same name as the man in the photograph. As I stood there, a chilling realization washed over me. The woman was not just a passenger, she was a spirit, a lost soul seeking closure for a love lost too soon. She had summoned me, a mere mortal, to bear witness to her tragic tale. Through her spectral sobs, she recounted the story of her love for Ethan. They had been childhood sweethearts, their love blossoming like a rare flower, but their happiness was short-lived. One fateful night, Ethan had been involved in a car accident on the Bridge of Lost Souls, a crash that claimed his life. The woman, unable to accept his death, had made a desperate plea to the spirits of the bridge. She had offered her own life in exchange for his return, and the spirits had granted her wish, but with a cruel twist. She was doomed to wander the mortal realm, forever seeking Ethan but never able to touch or hold him. As her story unfolded, the rain intensified, soaking us both to the bone. The woman's final plea was heartbreaking. She begged for forgiveness, not from me, but from Ethan's spirit, for the terrible sacrifice she had made. With each word, her form grew fainter, like mist dispersing in the wind. And then, in a heart-wrenching moment, she dissipated completely, leaving only the echo of her sorrowful words in the air. I was left alone in the pouring rain, standing before Ethan's grave, a witness to a love that had transcended death. As I drove away from the cemetery, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sadness that hung in the air. The tragic farewell of the ghostly lovers was a reminder that some love stories were destined for sorrow, no matter how deep the bond. Willowbrook's Bridge of Lost Souls would forever hold the secrets of their love, a melancholic tale that haunted me long after that night. The night was as dark as the soul of the town, a place where shadows whispered secrets and the past clung like a stubborn stain. As a cab driver, I had seen my fair share of eerie things on those dimly lit streets, but nothing could have prepared me for the night I picked up the hitchhiker. It was well past midnight when I received the call. The dispatcher's voice was jittery as he gave me the location, a desolate road that snaked through a dense forest. "Pick up the fare," he said, "and take them to the old abandoned mansion at the end of the road." I couldn't help but shiver as I navigated the winding path into the woods. The trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The darkness seemed to swallow the road, leaving me with only the dim glow of my headlights. Finally, I spotted her. A young woman standing at the side of the road, her thumb extended in silent plea. She wore a tattered white dress, her long, ebony hair cascading over her shoulders. Despite the chill in the air, she was barefoot, her feet covered in mud and dirt. I pulled over, unlocking the doors, and she slid into the back seat without a word. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, as if she were lost in thought or trapped in some distant memory. "Where to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The old mansion," she replied, her voice soft and haunting. As we continued down the winding road, unease settled over me like a heavy shroud. The mansion came into view, an imposing structure with broken windows and ivy-covered walls. It had been abandoned for years, rumored to be haunted by the ghost of a woman who had died under tragic circumstances. I parked the cab in front of the mansion, the engine idling. "We're here," I said, turning to look at the woman in the back seat. She didn't move. Instead, she continued to stare straight ahead, her eyes fixated on the mansion's decaying facade. "Are you sure this is the right place?" I asked, my voice trembling. Without warning, she turned to face me. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of life, and her lips curled into a sinister smile. It was then that I saw the dark stains on her dress, stains that looked suspiciously like blood. In a sudden, violent motion, she lunged at me, her cold hands wrapping around my throat. I gasped for air, my vision blurring as her nails dug into my skin. Panic surged through me as I struggled to break free, but her grip was relentless. As I fought for my life, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the rearview mirror. She wasn't just any hitchhiker. She was the vengeful spirit of the woman who had died in the mansion all those years ago. With every ounce of strength left in me, I managed to reach for the cab's horn, blaring it in a desperate plea for help. The sound shattered the eerie silence of the night, and to my astonishment, the ghost released her hold and vanished into thin air. Gasping for breath, I stumbled out of the cab, my heart racing. The mansion loomed before me, its dark windows now seemingly filled with malevolent eyes. I knew then that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. As I sped away from that cursed place, I couldn't help but wonder if the ghost would continue to haunt those lonely roads, forever seeking revenge on unsuspecting travelers. One thing was certain: I would never forget the night I encountered the haunting hitchhiker, a chilling reminder that some legends were all too real.